Good evening, Ishan.
Good evening, madam.
Ishan, you can hear me clearly, right?
Yes, madam.
Okay, right. Ishan, can you please check whether the others are coming? Because not whether the others are coming, they have to be here. Please call Vimukti and Reverend and ask them to join now.
Okay, madam.
Okay, right.
Madam?
Yes, Ishan.
No, I am Vimukti, madam.
All right. Oh,
I
so
and
both of you
Nishan
are
are here.
together, right?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So then no problem. I don't know whether Reverend Sohel would join. Anyway, I will send a message and see. Okay, give me a minute.
Okay.
So did I give you the lesson on Barbara Allen Vimukti? Ah, okay. He's also here, right? Okay.
No, madam.
I did not give you, right? So I'll just show you the document. This one I didn't, right?
No, madam.
Ah, okay. So I will share it first. Give me a minute. I will give you the hard copy when I meet you. For the moment, I will be sharing this with you. Okay, so I have shared it with you now. You can access it via your WhatsApp group. First, we will go through the introduction and then we will move to the ballads. Okay, right. So your presentation is also based on Barbara Allen. So because of that, I thought of starting with Barbara Allen and then we will move to Franklin's Tale. We also have to discuss Franklin's Tale as well. But first, we will finish Barbara Allen. And then, if time permits today, we will finish Franklin's Tale too. If not, I will have another online lecture with you because we anyway have two extra sessions to do. And also, 2 days we couldn't do the afternoon session. So that is also there. So we'll do that. Okay, so first we will start with an introduction to Barbara Allen. Right. Yes. So I hope you can see the screen. If not, let me know, right? If my voice is not audible or if you cannot see the screen, interrupt and tell me. Right. So Barbara Allen is identified as this folk poem, and also it is known to be one of the most widely collected song written in English language, as in one of the most prominent, predominant, one of the most famous poems written in English literature. So there's this idea that there were all these folklorists, that means they were interested in folklore and specifically folk poetry. Those who were interested in folk poetry have documented over 200 varieties, 200 variations of this ballad, right? And also, this is found in many regional collections than any other traditional song, because there were several traditional songs which were written during the Middle English time period. So we have discussed about the Middle English time period, shifting from the Old English to Middle English, how all these chivalry code and everything came into being. And here, this one specifically comes in this collection done by Francis Child. So here I will highlight this name, Francis Child. So he's one of the most prominent characters. So it is not like that he wrote all these, but he collected these folk poems, right? So they were preserved then, they were documented. So usually what happens to folklores and folk poems, we have discussed this before. When something is only oral, those would not be documented properly, right? So those would not be preserved, I would say. But when something is documented, there's this idea of preservation. And that was done by this person called Francis Child. And also, there was this other key figure as well, Cecil Sharp, and even the modern ethnomusicologists. So ethnomusicology comes under anthropology, right? Ethnoanthropology, as in how all these people were interested in folk poetry, folklore, all these things, and specifically folk music, ethnomusic, right? So there are several collections like that, and in all these collections, you can see this ballad. So wherever they researched throughout Europe, this poem, this ballad was there, right? And also, it is important to know what is the difference between a ballad and a poem. So, a ballad is usually a slow and also a very sentimental type of a song. It is much more a lyric than a poem, right? So, if you are ever to define the term ballad, so you can identify it more as a lyric or as a song, much more than a poem, right? Because in a ballad, you can see a story, right? Narrative stories there, storytelling processes there, and also the stanzas would be short, and also there would be several stanzas. And also, when you consider all these traditional ballads, usually those are without an author, right? Those are anonymous because anyway, those represent these oral traditions. Because of that, you cannot find a specific author, right? And because of this universal appeal, right? So it is considered as kind of a benchmark for folk song collectors. So if you are a folk song collector, definitely you have to have Barbara Allan there. That sort of an idea is there. And also, this is very significant because it gained equal popularity across all these European nations, right? And also, not only European nations, if we first consider the European nations, across England, across Scotland, Ireland, all these predominant European nations, this could be heard. You could find it in anywhere, and also throughout North America, right? So here, when you consider most of the ballads, you can say that these ballads are tied to one region, one European region. But it was not like that. Barbara Island literally thrived everywhere. It was so popular. So each culture could adopt it. So the core tragic love story was kept. So this is indeed a tragic story. When you go through the plot line, you would see. So maybe because it was a tragic story, right? And maybe because it was about romance, and also on the other hand, maybe because it was simple. So with all these reasons, what happened was it was preserved and each culture adopted it. And because of that, you cannot see one single authentic version. It was not like that. So all these European regions, and from Europe to America, right? So all of them considered it as their own. And also we need to remember when we refer to this idea of America, right? So Barbara Allen becoming an American version, right? So it is not an innocent process. So you need to tap into colonization as well, because how America was colonized and how all these were transformed there. So finding an American version of Barbara Allen has its roots to imperialism as well. And also, the most important thing that you can find is it is still sung and recorded today across all these regions. So if we don't have time, otherwise I would have let you listen to one of the versions as well, but I will share some of the versions via YouTube, then you can listen to it later. So still sung and still recorded. So that means immense popularity, and also not only immense popularity, equal popularity all over Europe and America, right? Yeah. And also, this began in the 17th century, and also, we are not very sure about the timeline. We need to remember that these came as oral versions. So, because of that, we cannot pinpoint and say, so this was the time period that it began likewise. So, it spread, I would say, both orally and also in print, right? So, exact origin is unknown, but you can find references starting from 16,000, right? Yeah. And also spread through two channels. Oral tradition was there. And also, on the other hand, the printed version. And it was not like that printed in a very proper manner, right? So, printed broadsides, as in cheap printed sheets, were sold in streets likewise. But again, you can see all these cater to two traditions, oral tradition on one hand, and also printed tradition. And also, we need to remember, so when something happens as an oral tradition, oral versions tend to change with each singer. And also, printed versions, they would change with different writers, as in different collectors. You cannot exactly call them writers because they were collecting all these, right? Yeah. And because of this dual transmission method, because of that, the poem or the ballad was survived, right? So it ensured its survival. And also, not only the survival, evolution as well. The poem did not survive, I would say, as it is. There were several versions. And here we are going to talk about the three main versions. So these are considered the most predominant versions. So the first one, here you can see Scottish Martin Mars version. So first we are going to look at it. And then you have the second one, English Scarlet Town version, right? So the first one has a Scottish root, and the second one has an English root, specifically kind of an anglicized version, an English version, typical English version. And there you can see how the language is more anglicized, right? So we will go through all these. And then the third one, you have an American folk tradition version. So when you consider all these American versions, what you can see is there is this variability, highly variable. Language is simplified, and we need to understand. So this happens after the verge of imperialism. So people were not very educated, people who lived in America, right? So these were transmitted from Europe literally. And also, you can see these were set in very vague southern locations, right? Southern singing styles were there. So, because of that, you cannot see the archaic vocabulary that you can see in the first two versions. So, we will go through those differences, the contrasting points later as well. So, now we will move to the first version. So this is the Scottish version, and you need to remember that these are anonymous ballads, right? Yeah. So we'll do a line by line analysis. I will be sharing the recording with you as well once I upload this to YouTube. So I have shared the soft copy with you. You can refer to it as well. I'm sorry, I was unable to give you a hard copy. I will give you once I meet you. Not this Thursday as well, because this Thursday I have the Preaching the Dhamma competition. But again, I will make sure to give you a hard copy. I will keep the hard copies at the department. Right. Okay. So here, if you want to jot down anything, note down anything, please do so in a notebook or wherever, and then I will give you the hard copy. Then you can refer to it as well. Right. So the first line, in Scarlet Town, where I was born. So what is meant by scarlet? Anyone? What is the meaning of a scarlet? As a color, what color does it refer to? Any
Yellowish.
idea? Yeah, it would be red. It's like deep red reverend, right? In Scarlet Town. And when you say Scarlet Town, there you can see. So it gives this idea of, I would say, kind of a bloody situation. Blood, death, and also red is attached to passion as well. So, not a very conventional beginning, I would say, specifically for a ballad, for a traditional ballad. And also, here, the narrator is very confusing, I would say, because where I was born. So here it looks like a first person narration in Scarlet Town where I was born. So a reference to a town, and also this refers to this town in England, Berkshire, and also foreshadows blood, death, and passion. And here I was born. And when someone refers to the birth of that person, right? And here Barbara is referring to her birth, herself. So that gives this idea, as in there's this establishment of her figure as a local known figure, a popular figure. That idea is established there. But then when you refer to the second line, there was a fair maid dwelling. Then you can see how the narration shifts from the first person narration then to the third person narration. Again, not very conventional, I would say. As a literary device, you can see how the narration shifts. So that would be one of the literary devices as well. And then there was a fair maid dwelling, and we discussed about the word fair that refers to beauty, not exactly the word fair or the adjective fair that we use it in the modern society, modern context. So that refers to beauty. Fair maid dwelling, and also when you say fair maid, there's this idea that she was unmarried. That means she was available. So this typical romantic female figure that you find in a romantic ballad. So again, when you say fair maid dwelling, that gives this idea that she is desirable. That idea is also given. And also dwelling means living. So that means in this Scarlet Town, there was a lady who is very fair, who is very beautiful. She is desirable. She was living in this town. And then made every youth cry well away, right? So well away is equal to this term that we use now. So it gives this idea, alas, right? Made every youth cry. She's so beautiful, that means she causes men grief, right? She makes men long for her, and that would cause grief. So again, you can see, so made every youth cry. And also well away would be again a reference to the colloquial language that you have. And then again, you can see when you say made every youth cry. So cry can be something, some sort of a happy cry as well. But here, crying is usually attached to kind of a grief. So foreshadows the fatal attraction to come with this line in the very first sentence. And then very first stanza, third sentence, you can see, third line. And then her name was Barbara Allan. And that is very important because here you can see direct naming is there. That means her reputation is given. So she is someone popular, right? And also you can see the name becomes kind of a refrain throughout. Throughout you can see this name, Barbara Allan. And also the narration shift, where I was born, right? And then her name was Barbara Allan. And also some people say that the first I refers to an external narrator as well. Again, there are scholarly arguments. Some people say, no, that is not Barbara Allan. There you cannot see a narrator shift. That is someone external. That would be a person who is outside, right? That would be an external narrator. But again, there are other arguments as well. No, this is a narration shift. So Barbara is referring to herself, distancing herself from the poem. That idea is also there, right? Yeah. And then you can see all in the merry month of May, right? So here you can see What does the month May symbolize? I think we have discussed about this earlier as well. The symbolic idea?
Vesak.
Yeah, it can be a spring, Reverend, right? A spring, and also happiness, can be joy,
Yes.
life, and even renewal, youth, and specifically if you join these two ideas, young love, youth love, and you can connect those two as well, young love specifically. And also, it is not just the month of May, it is the merry month of May. So, merry month, so that refers to happiness. A month which contains extreme happiness. Spring. But it is very ironic because when you go through the poem, you would see that this is directly connected to death, right? So, this merry month contains death, which is very ironic. And then when green buds they were swelling, right? So again green buds were swelling, that means nature was blooming. It is not just this simple normal picture of the environment, but the nature was blooming. But what is happening? Young Jimmy Grove on his deathbed lay. So the month is merry, this is spring, everything is blossoming literally, but this young Jemmy is dying, right? And also, what is the significance of young death? As in, when someone dies at his or her old age, contrasting it with young age. So, what would be considered as more tragic? Young death or old death? As in the early death or old death?
Early death.
Yeah, early death, definitely, right? Yeah, there's this idea of tragedy. So that would be a tragedy to die young. And also here you can see this name, young Jimmy Grove. So his name, and again, it differs from version to version. So in the first one, it would be young Jimmy Grove. So then in the next version, you can say that would be another name, refers to the same person but the name differs, right? And also here you can see, so this is just the second stanza, but the protagonist or else the lead male character, the male lead, he's dying when the ballad begins, right? So there you can see, so these are again typical of all these medieval romances. And why is he dying? He is dying of love sickness, literally, right? So he is dying because of her love for Barbara Allan. So there's this idea that in medieval times, and also not only medieval but also early modern belief. So it again was a medical belief as well. So that may sound very absurd when we think of it like that now. But even during medieval time periods and also even early modern time periods, love sickness was identified as one cause of death. Even as a medical belief, medical practitioners also believed love sickness can cause death. So there are all these references, the contemporary socio-cultural beliefs are reflected in these poems. So she's literally killing him by rejecting him. So he is dying because Barbara Allen has rejected him. So Barbara Allen is now established as the cause of death. And also, on the other hand, the cause of, I would say, potential cure as well. Right? Yeah. And then the next one you can see, he sent his man into her then. So there are several ideas that you can see here. When you say he sent his man, right? So man here refers to a servant. So on one hand, you can argue that he was too weak to go himself because this man is literally on his deathbed. But on the other hand, there's this idea of social propriety, right? So we have discussed much about this idea of chivalry code, the idea of honor, and going by the social norms. So to maintain social propriety, he's sending a messenger. right? He's sending a man servant. And also, on the other hand, it shows his desperation, I would say. So he wants her to come. And then he's sending a message through a messenger to the town where she was dwelling, right? And again, you can see the repetition of dwelling. You could say dwelling in the first stanza as well. So it is repeated in the third stanza. So this repetition creates this ballad rhythm, right? So the ballad structure is kept and also ballad rhythm is kept. And also you can see that they live separately. That is also indicated. So no impropriety, I would say. So propriety is managed throughout. Yeah. So no connection before marriage. That is also indicated because we need to remember that this is a time where this chivalry record was kept and it was honored. And then, oh, haste and come to my master, dear. So now this is spoken by this manservant. Again, you can see how the turn taking happens. So first it might be the narrator, oh, Barbara Allen, and there are different references. And now the manservant is speaking. And also here you can see a sense of urgency. Haste means hurry, right? Yeah. And then master dear. And also when you say master dear, so you can say that this servant has kind of an affection for this dying master. And that speaks volumes of this dying master's character as well. So for not all the masters, the servants would, I would say, address as dear. That means there is this dear bond. So that means this person might be a kind-hearted, a good person. And then there's kind of this idea of emotional play. And if your name be Barbara Allen, and also when you say if your name be Barbara Allen, there's this idea that it is kind of a formal verification, right? And also it shows that ritual quality of summoning someone, right? Requesting someone to come. And that is done in a very formal manner. Again, all these things reflect this idea of, I would say, chivalry code, the idea of honor as well. And then you can see, so slowly raise she up. And again, slowly, there you may note down, there you can see a repetition. And again, this idea slowly, that also shows this reluctance. So now she knows that this man is dying, right? So he might not be her beloved, right? But still is dying because of her. But she's very reluctant here. And also you can see her pride as well, right? So she's reluctant to, I would say, literally rise. And also here race would be rose as in synonym for rose, archaic past tense, rise, right? So now we use it as rose, but back then it was used as race. And slowly she came nigh him. So nigh you may write down, nigh means near. And also you can say the word slowly is thrice repeated, not just twice, thrice repeated. And that shows continued reluctance. She's reluctant. She literally prolongs his suffering. She's not worried, at least a bit. At this stage, you can see, right? Yeah. And when she drew the curtain by, so it is like this idea of privacy in her chamber can be bed curtains. And also this idea of drawing the curtain that shows revelation can be very symbolic, revelation of her character, right? And also this idea of confrontation, how she controls the moment and also how she owns the moment. To an extent, you can see this idea of female autonomy, female power as well, right? Yeah. And then, young man, I think you are dying. So again, it is very cold, the way that she addresses this man, cold and also detached. And also, she's not addressing him by his name, not as Jemmy or not as beloved or dear, whatever. Young man. So this distance is maintained. And also, you can see kind of an obvious cruelty, I would say. So no sympathy is there. And when you literally say, I think you're dying, you literally confront someone who's on the deathbed, and then, okay, so let me increase the font size a bit. Right. Yeah. So there you can see, right? Young man, I think you are dying. So very direct, very cruel, and no sympathy is there. And then now again, the narrative shifts to this young man. Oh, it's I'm sick and very, very sick. And again, you can see repetition. It emphasizes his agony, his pain. And also, kind of, it gives this idea of sigh of pain. And again, it caters to his agony, his pain, his desperation, and he literally seeks her pity, right? I am sick and very, very sick. And this idea of gaining love via pity, even now you can see how people tend to kind of, access love through the channel of pity. And you can say that it is not something new, it is something very old, it was there all the time. And then it's all for Barbara Allan. So it is a direct cause. So literally his love for her is killing him. And here you can see how the responsibility is given, right? So this man is making her responsible there. And also he's requesting in a way for her to save him with sort of, I would say, a returned affection, right? Yeah. But then here you can say, or the better for me, ya never be. So ya say means you shall. Here you can say, you may write it down. Ya say. Ya say never be. You shall. So archaic language. Examples for archaic language. You never be. And also you can say, this is extremely vindictive. She denies him hope as well. Though your heart's blood were, or the better for me, your shall never be, though your heart's blood were a spilling, right? And again, you can see even his death won't soften her. Even the blood from his heart would be spilling. She was not kind of, concerned. That idea is also there. Even there was blood spilling out of his heart, not bothered at all. And there you can see kind of an extreme image, visual imagery, and also very bloody sort of visual imagery, very violent. And this speaks volumes of the contemporary time period as well, I would say, because here we are referring to Middle English time period, and there were several military, as in armed military contexts happening, right? So because of all these military conquests and the general military context, I would say, so because of all these things, you can see how it is reflected in literature as well, right? Yeah. So here better refers to this idea of being improved and also healed, or the better for me you shall never be, right? There you can see extreme cruelty. And then, or deny a mind, young man. So here deny a mind means again is Scottish. Don't you remember? You may write it down. This part, let me highlight it. Don't you remember, young man? Yes, don't you remember? So don't you remember, young man, says she, when the red wine you were filling. So here, when the red wine you were filling, it red wine again foreshadows blood, right? Blood, and also on the other hand, there's this idea of celebration as well, right? So she refers to some sort of a celebration. When the red wine you were filling, that too made the healths go round and round. Again, healths means toasts, right? So this idea of a celebration might be after a conquest, because here we are looking at an extreme military conquest as well, military context. And then round and round, that means multiple toasts to others. So that shows this idea of again togetherness of knighthood, I would say, all these celebrations. So this is identified as a public social ritual as well after a conquest that they celebrate. And then what has happened? So she's referring to an incident here. Don't you remember that there was this particular incident? After a celebration, you were celebrating with some of your friends, most probably knights, right? So we have to assume that those are knights. And then when they were toasting literally, they have slighted Barbara Allen, specifically this person, right? So this dying young man has slighted Barbara Allen. So slighted here refers to this idea of insulting. You may write it down if you don't know the meaning. Slighted, disrespected, or insulted. Insulted publicly, not just privately as well, right? So there's this idea that he insulted. Can be a verbal insult, and also on the other hand can be maybe he tasked others before her or else instead of her. That idea is also there. Or else you can consider it as a verbal insult as well. So here again this refers to the chivalry code, right? This idea of honor-based culture. So public humiliation is not accepted in such a culture. Because here we are referring to chivalry code anyway. So her pride is wounded. This idea of honor and pride. So when we talk about Barbara Allen, so that would be one of the major themes. Pride and honor. How pride can be wounded. And again, that is identified as something vain. So your pride is wounded when you are vain. That idea, when you have some sort of an internal depth, you won't be wounded. So that idea is also there. Kind of an attack to the contemporary society, the contemporary higher class as well. And again, we need to remember this idea of higher class is again something arbitrary that is created by culture. Yes. And then you can see he turned his face onto the wall, right? So again, turning the face onto the wall would be another traditional deathbed gesture of despair, right? You may remember Matta Kundali as well. So this deathbed scene, right? So this is a traditional deathbed gesture, turning face towards the wall. So that means he's literally turning away, not only from her, but from his own life as well. It is like this idea of resignation to death. Now he's ready to die. So now he realizes that she's not going to forgive him. And also, again, you can see this is just kind of a very slight matter that shows the vanity of the upper class as well. And then, and death was with him dealing. So dealing means working. Death is kind of working on him. So personifies death here. Death was with him. You may write it down. That would be a literary device here. Death as a personal agent, and also death as someone who is very active. Death as an active agent, not someone passive, not as an external agent. Very active here. So he is giving up and death is doing his duty there. Yes. And then adieu, my dear friends, all. Right? Adieu means farewell, bidding farewell. If you have done French, you know. So this is coming from French. But still in English, you can see in several poems, and even now people use adieu to bid goodbye, to bid farewell. And here the repetition is also very important. It gives this sense of finality there. Repetition. And also he addresses everyone present, this last goodbye. Very dramatic, you can see here. You can picture this scene as well. And here, this is very important. So his final words, be kind to Barbara Allen. So that shows his love towards her. So final words are defending her. His final words are literally defending her despite her cruelty, right? So he forgives her publicly. So that means when he forgives her publicly, others cannot scold her or others cannot insult her afterwards. So it is like that he accepts his fault in a way, in kind of a non-verbal manner. And also you need to remember that this was a time where honor was identified as something very specific. So even though he wants to apologize or else even if he wants to accept his fault, it is not actually a fault when you look at it in that way. But even if so, he's unable to do that, right? Why? Because he's unable to do that because he needs to, I would say, keep his honor, right? If he cannot say that I have done something wrong. So he's using a tactic here, but again, he knows if he does not create kind of a positive image about Barbara Allen, what would happen? She would be insulted, right? And her honor would be damaged. So he's protecting it as well, forgiving her publicly. And also, you can see his continued love despite rejection, even on his deathbed. And also, he requests community compassion for her. From the community, from the people who are gathered around, he requests compassion for her. And also, it kind of heightens this idea of tragedy here as well, because he literally dies loving her. Yes. And then, if we refer to the next part, as she was walking over the fields, right? So now, then you can say now she's leaving his deathbed, right? Now, this idea of departure. So there you can see her reaction is very cold. Now, just going away, just departing, not with a single, I would say, a drop of remorse, just going. But then when she was walking over the fields, and when you say over the fields, there's this idea of rural, pastoral setting, and also over the fields. Now she's out there in nature. So nature is always identified as this open space for reflection. Maybe you have heard about this term forest bathing as well. So now for depression, it is recommended by medical practitioners, forest bathing. That means you can go to a forest and then spend time in the forest nature. Then that would cure depression. Some sort of an idea is there. So likewise, you can see. So nature is identified as an open space where you can reflect. And that happens to her. Now she's alone with her thoughts now. So again, you can say this idea, physical distance kind of mirrors emotional separation. So she maintained this emotional separation up to now. Now that they are physically distanced, right? Now she's coming to her right senses, I would say. Now she realizes the consequences of her act, literally. And then she heard the dead bell knelling. So, dead bell means it is like this church bell. Again, you can see all these religious connotations. Church bell is toiling for the deceased. That means bell is toiling because this person has literally died, right? Yeah. And knelling means again toiling. And again, it sounds like kneeling. So, kneeling means submission. And also, that refers to this idea of submission to death, right? Literally, submission to death is there. That means submission of death. And also, there you can see that means literal announcement of Jeremy's death. So, death has occurred. And here, this would be this auditory moment of realization because now he has submitted himself to death. And this is the moment that she realizes, so the consequences of her own pride. And then, and every jaw the dead bell gave. So, jaw means a strike, right? So, jaw would be again, if you refer to the verb as it is a stroke toll of the bell. So, again, here you can identify the Scottish Northern English dialect, jaw, a synonym for stroke, the past tense verb. And with each individual ring, it kind of almost penetrates her consciousness. So it is very heavy to her consciousness now. So there is this repetitive sound, and repetitive sound stands as a symbol for her relentless guilt there. And then cried, woe to Barbara Allan, right? So she projects her guilt onto the bell now, right? Only now she realizes this. So woe symbolizes grief, curse, and also this idea bell. Bell seems to condemn her by name, or to Barbara Allan. So it is the picture, the emotional picture that she gets by this auditory reference. So her conscience is kind of awakened now. Her conscience is speaking through the nature, through the bells, I would say, literally church. And also, when you refer to church, this idea of religion is there as well. So, this public announcement of her responsibility that can be seen there. And then, oh, mother, mother, make my bed. So, what is the idea here? She addresses her mother. So, this domestic setting is reflected there. And also, make my bed. What is the idea here? This is a reference to deathbed. So, that would be a traditional request. So, prepare my deathbed. So, that may sound very absurd to you, but here you can see this idea of death was romanticized. So, literal romanticizing of death here, and also repetition of mother, it is almost childlike, and you would also feel, I would say, somewhat sympathetic towards Barbara Allen as well. She's vulnerable now she's not this cruel character, violent character, so she's ready to die now. I'll die for him tomorrow. So there you can see, right? So, and also, there's this idea, my love has died for me today. I think we missed one line. Ah, yes, make it soft and narrow. And again, here, soft means soft. You may write it down. That would be the Scottish term. Soft and narrow. And also, when you say narrow, it is almost like a coffin. And also, this idea of narrow bed, kind of like a single bed, this indication that she would die alone, she would die unmarried as this maid. And also it is kind of a contrast with the consummation of marriage as well. And also there's this idea, my love has died for me today. So first time she admits my love, after death only she admits it. But again you can see that it is too late, so confession comes after his death. And also this idea, recognition, he has died for me today, recognizes his, as in his death, he has died because of a rejection. So the acceptance of responsibility, even though it comes late, now she accepts it. I'll die for him tomorrow. This idea of immediacy, right? And also kind of a parallel structure, mutual death because of love, literally dying because of love sickness. And that happens in a very parallel, simultaneous, mutual structure. So that means she could not follow him in the real life, so she would follow him in death. That is the idea. So equal sacrifice, balancing out, right? Balancing out this idea of, I would say, scale of love. And then, farewell, she said, your virgins all. And then here, your virgins all means all these unmarried young women who are her peers, her friends, literally. And again, this would be a public address, again, like the one that this young lord made, her beloved maid. So she is also making a public address. So it is far more like she is making her death kind of a moral lesson. And also farewell, she knows she is dying. And shun the fault I fell in. So there also you can see kind of a public announcement, and also a moral message is given. Shun means avoid. You may write it down. Shun, avoid. So fault is her pride. And fell in. So it is like that I fell into my fault, and then fell in is this idea. It is like stumbled into. And also you can see that there's this idea that Jemmy fell in love, right? So this idea of falling in love is also there. You can identify it as a pun there, pun, pun. Yeah. Sounding similar, but giving different ideas. And she's admitting her error there. Henceforth, take warning by the fall. Henceforth means from now on. If you don't know, you may write it down. Henceforth, from now on. Take warning. So this is like a caution, right? So there's this idea of moral downfall. Right? So there you can see how the ballad becomes very didactic. Right? So it is didactic. We have discussed about this idea of didactic literature. That means literature is used to teach moral lessons. So there you can see. And also of cruel Barbara Allen. So she names herself cruel. So self-condemnation you can see. So the defined characteristic she will be remembered for. So she is letting the others remember her like that as the cruel Barbara Allen. So her name becomes very synonymous with hard-heartedness, I would say. It is very ironic on the other hand as well. She gets the fame she wanted, but in a very notorious manner as a negative example. So there you can see this idea of transformation from pride to remorse, which happens very quickly. And also, again, you can see even though it happens quickly, it is too quick to save either the beloved, as in the youth, the Lord, or Barbara Allen. To save either lover, that was not enough. It was not hasty enough, I would say. And also, you can see the tragedy here. And also, it is trying to give you, as in the readership, by you, I'm referring to the readership, right? A moral lesson is there, how, as in the consequences of pride and all these. And also you can see this idea of gender warning as well. Women are expected not to be cruel, something like that. So women are told not to be cruel. And also there's a lesson for like the knights as well, to kind of guard their honor and all these things. And also how public honor should not be, I would say, torn, right? And also this idea of dying for love. Right. So any questions about version 1 before we move to version 2?
No, madam.
Okay,
No,
right.
no.
Right. Okay. Then we will move to version 2. So again, it would be more or less the same. So I'm going to refer to the most important points, not kind of an exact line by line analysis like we did with version 1, because here you can see some similar points as well, but also some contrasting points. So we will refer to all the key points, specific points there. So it was in and about the Martin Mass time. So there you can see, so the things are different, right? So back then it was Scarlet Town, and also it was the time of May, and also the reference was given much later. But here it is Martin Mass. So Martin Mass, you may write down, that is 11th of November. That is identified as Saint Martin's feast day, Martin Mass. So again has a very strong Christian connotation. You can see how these were used to, I would say, spread religion, spread Christianity. So this is also known as like Old Halloween. Halloween, I'm pretty sure that all of you are familiar with. It is like this harvest festival in Europe. Yeah. So November 11th. Yeah, so this is like a feast day, right? Yeah, so it is like this time of livestock slaughter, and also it is like this end of harvest, right? The winter is approaching. Yeah, and also because winter is approaching and November can specifically be, right? So November is approaching, so you can, with first-hand experiences, I would say, experience this, because it would be this darker season, I would say. And when something is darker, it is anyway associated with death, I would say, right? So here you can see the comparison. We would talk about all these contrasting points, and you are expected to do your presentation on that as well, right? This comparing and contrasting element, I would say. So versus May in Scarlet Town, you can see this idea of Martinmas, November, fall, and dark, all these other contrasting qualities. And also in and about. When you say in and about, what about the timing, Reverend and boys? In and about. Is it like a very specific time or vague timing? Specific or unsure? Here you can see it. It was in and about the Martin Mass time. Is the speaker very sure about the time temporal setting? What is the idea there? In and about the Martin Mars time. Yes, you can see this uncertainty there, right? So the speaker is not very sure. So vague timing, and also in a way it adds kind of this folkloric quality as well, because here we are talking about an oral poem. And then when the green leaves were falling, so that again gives this idea of autumn imagery, right? So falling back then, right, the first one we saw, it was spring and green leaves, it was in full bloom, but now it is different, autumn imagery. Decay is there, literally death is symbolized by nature, so falling suggests loss and also foreshadows human death as well. Not only the leaves are dying, but also a human is also going to die. And then this is very important, the next part, Sir John Grammy, right? In the West Country. So now West Country means Western Scotland. If you want, you may write it down. This is the Scottish version, I would say. And what is indicated when you say Sir John Grammy? What is the difference you can see there? Young Jamie and Sir John Grammy. When you say Sir John, what is the idea? Which one is more respectful?
Sir John.
Yes, exactly. So Sir John is more respectful, right? So there you can say this literal idea, right? So literal reference to chivalry code, literal reference to knighthood, not like the first one. Now it is Sir John. And also in the West Country, the geographical location is given. Fell in love with Barbara Allan, right? So it is just like fell in love. It is something like sudden. Again, when you say like fell in love, it gives this idea of kind of a danger as well. So it is something sudden, and also it is kind of like something passive. It is something like that love happened to him. And also you can see how Barbara Allen's name is used kind of almost as a ritual. Even in the first stanza of the first poem, first version that we discussed, you could see that. Likewise. So Barbara Allen, that name is something constant. That name you can see throughout. And then he sent his man down through the town. Some words are different, but again, the scene is very similar, right? And also, you can see this idea that his man again refers to the servant, and also again this idea he's too ill to go himself, and also this idea of honor. It is not like that you should go, you should send your servant, some sort of an idea like that, again maintaining the chivalry code to the place where she was dwelling. So going to the place that, as in literally her residence. So this idea of separate residences, that idea is again given. This idea of propriety, they are not living in the same place, there are two separate residences, so how the propriety is maintained throughout. And then, oh, haste and come to my master, dear. So that is again similar. I'm not going to go through it again. This there again, there's this idea of emotional urgency as well, and the servant's affection for his lord as well. And then Gin Gab Barbara Allen. So here again would be this Scottish dialect marker if. This refers to if. If you are Barbara Allen, that is the idea here. And also here you can see be is used as a synonym for are. So now also we consider are as a be verb, but that would be the class, or that would be the category of all these helping verbs. But there you can see. So are were synonymous with be. Yes. And then you can see, oh, holy, holy rose she up, right? So again, you can see, again, that shows slowly, slowly, carefully, and very reluctantly. And again, that gives you kind of this visual imagery. Not bothered at all, literally. So very reluctantly, and also this idea of repetition is there, and repetition indicates a deliberate slowness. Deliberately, purposely, she's slow. She's not rushing, right? Despite his dying state, I would say. And then you can see there's this idea of pride, anger, and also might be internal conflict as well. And also, on the other hand, it shows her vanity as well, right? Not bothered about this dying man, literally, to the place where he was lying. So that means, yeah, confronting, this idea of confrontation. And also, there you can see this lying again suggests his deathbed, dying position. And then when she drew the curtain by, again, that shows this idea that her action, revelation. So she's in charge. Again, female power, female autonomy. She's taking control. And then drew by, that means pulling aside, this idea of veiling and unveiling, right? Drawing the curtain, that gives this idea of unveiling as well. Young man, I think you are dying. Again, the same idea, very cold. And again, not calling by his name. And this is far more specific than the first one, because in the first one you could see how this young man was identified just by his name, young Jamie, but here he was identified as sir. But then Barbara is not bothered by all this, this idea of class or whatever. So young man, she would definitely call him as in, always she would call him as young man, I think you are dying, very cold, right? And also this, like, I would say very much of an understatement. She knows that he is dying. Cruel observation, passive observation of the obvious, I would say. And also no comfort is given, no endearment, just addressing his death. And then there's this idea of his confession. Oh, it's sick and very, very sick. And again, you can see very, very sick. Repetition is there. We discussed about this, and also seeking sympathy through kind of, extreme language. And also the next part would be a bit different, and it is for a Barbara Allan. So here this TIS indicates it's, and again that means it's all. Tis a, here you can see, you may write it down, that indicates its soul. That would be a Scottish contraction, a shortened form which you can see in a Scottish version. Or the better for me, yours never be, right? And again, when you say it's for a Barbara Island, so he literally makes her the sole cause of his death. So I'm not dying because of any other reason, not dying out of physical sickness, I'm dying for you. That is the literal idea. So dying out of love sickness, love as a literal fatal condition. That means she has the power to either cure or kill him. And then, or the better for me yours never be. And again, you can see how the narration shifts. So again, here, this one, your s, that means you shall. Again, Scottish future tense. You may write it down. And also, you shall never be. So, very vindictive again. She denies him hope of recovery. So, I don't care, right? Whether you recover or whether you live or die. It's not my business, literally. That is the idea. And then, though your heart's blood were a spilling, again, you can see the same imagery, extreme condition. Even death won't move her. And also, heart's blood, it is like this reference to life's essence. And also, it refers to this military context that you could see. Very violent image. And also, this violent image coming from a woman's mouth. And again, that is very important. So, women were also very used to violence, I would say, right? Nowadays, you can see how women are pictured as, not nowadays, I would say, nowadays, including nowadays. And also you can see when you consider all these traditional literary texts, specifically after modern English, how women are portrayed as soft creatures. But here you can see a very bloody imagery is coming out of her mouth, right? A violent image. And then you can see again the same line. We discussed about this, deny mind, don't you remember? Scottish line again. So she explains her cruelty. This is the reason of my cruelty. She reasons out. And then again, you can see young man is repeated. So not much respect as well, right? Yeah. So again, there's this idea of emotional distance as well. Not beloved, not lover, not dear, right? Yeah. The servant was more dear to the young man than this Barbara Allen, or the lady, I would say, right? That you made the hills go round and round. There you can see, so no direct references to, I would say, red wine. So maybe it was identified as something improper much later. This idea of alcohol can be, right? And but again, tavern refers to this idea of public house, social space. And then made the hells go round and round. So again, this idea of toasts, right? Round and round to many people repeatedly. This idea of social ritual again. And then slighted Barbara Allan. We discussed about this side of insult. And then again, the same line you can see, he turned his face onto the wall. This idea of traditional deathbed gesture of literally despair, turning away from her. And also this idea of visual symbol of rejection and also defeat on the other hand as well. And then adieu, adieu, my dear friends all, and be kind to Barbara Allan. I'm not going to discuss it again because we discussed it. The same lines are repeated. This idea of his dying request, requesting, I would say, this idea of community compassion. And also it kind of makes a guilt worse, I would say, because he is noble to the end, keeping his nobility towards the very end, I would say. And then again, you can see slowly, slowly she left him. Slowly, slowly raised she up. And you can see how this has changed now. Back then it was, you could say raise. Now it is raise. Again, rose, a Scottish past tense. And then reluctance of shock, I would say, slowly, slowly. And also, again, it kind of mirrors her earlier slow rising as well. It is like she's kind of processing what just happened and she's not actually bothered by it, right? Yeah, leaving, abandoning. And then sighing said she could not stay. So there you can say first sign of emotion. So that is why I told you. So this version is slightly different than the first one. In the first one, you can see nothing of remorse, I would say. Not even a drop of remorse until she goes, as in until she's out in the nature. But here you can see a sigh. Sighing said she could not stay. First sign of emotion, right? And also here COUD, could, it is not a spelling mistake, it is not a typo. So that is the Scottish version of, as in back then, the Scottish spelling. So L was not there. And again, you can see even now we do not pronounce L, but we have L there. So all these are different variations. Here you can see the Scottish variation, could, COUD. So you may remember these, you may keep these in your mind when you answer your examination questions, I would say. So these contrasting points and also these dialectic differences, language differences, I would say. Yeah. And could not stay. So this compulsion to leave is there. She does not want to stay. So that means on one hand, you can argue that it can be ambiguous as well. Because on one hand, scholars say that this suggests her grief and also her guilt, and also some other scholars say no, this might be social propriety because it was not right for her to stay there when this man was dying, something like that, because there were all these demarcations, these lines made between male and female propriety, right? So can be that as well. And then since death of life had reft him, so reft here refers to robbed, you may write it down, robbed, stolen, that idea. And also this idea death of life. So I will just type it here within brackets. You may write it down. Oxymoron. Oxymoron is a literary device that the writer has used here. Death of life. That means putting two contrasting things together, death and life. Death has stolen his life. Death as an active agent as well. So she doesn't say that I killed him. Death has stolen him, evading responsibility here. So you can see within, as in within the course of three stanzas, how her narration shifts. You can see there, right? Yeah. So passive construction, distancing herself from responsibility here. But then you can see from the next stanza onwards how it changes. So if you have written it down, oxymoron means two contrasting qualities are put together. Just like paradox, I would say. If you need more time to jot it down, let me know. So here you can see, so it is kind of more darker, right? The seasonal setting and Scottish dialect markers are there. And also you can see no explicit death here, no very, I would say, direct death. And how he's identified as Sir John. Yeah. I hope you have written it down. If not, let me know. This idea of oxymoron as a literary device. Yeah. And then you can see she had not gained a mile but twa. So here gain means gone. You may write it down. It can be guessed anyway. And twa means two. Scottish dialect. A mile or two, right? So that means Barbara Allan had not gone more than 2 miles. Just 2 miles from the place where she had left her dying lover, literally. So the short distance again shows her emotional restlessness, I would say. She hasn't gone far before being stuck by, I would say, her conscience as also her fate, I would say. The rhythm slows there, you can see. So it kind of suggests the beginning of her realization and also her remorse. And then when she heard the dead bell ringing, right? So there was this idea of kneeling. And then she hears the sound of this funeral bell, signaling death. So dead bell is kind of a traditional symbol in ballads as well, right? So it is like this momentum, or it is like kind of a reminder of death. And the sound of the bell externalizes her internal guilt. It translates into her internal guilt. So she realizes that this might be for her lover. This bell might be for her lover, Sir John. And every jaw that the dead bell guide. So with every toll, jaw is toll here, right? Stroke. The bell made. Guide means gave. You may write it down. Guide that you can see here. It would have been better if you had the hard copy, yeah, but yes. But we need to finish this soon because you have the presentation as well. You have to get ready for the presentation. Yeah, guide means gave. So again, kind of a repeated sense of mourning. So this idea of inevitability of death as well, and also the rhyme of death. And also each toll is like an accusation of her guilt. It cried woe to Barbara Allan. So slight differences of lines, but again the same idea. So it is like the bell is calling out her name, cursing her literally, reminding her of her cruelty. It is like kind of a tragic, I would say, recognition as well. Yes. And then there you can see the next stanza. Oh, mother, mother, make my bed. Right? Barbara asks her mother to prepare her deathbed. Again, you can see we discussed about this idea of childlike kind of, consciousness, and also this idea of making the deathbed. Again, the same line, soft and narrow, suggesting this idea of a coffin. Since my love died for me today, again, the same lines. I'm not going to go into details there because we already discussed her lover died because of his love, that idea. And then also this idea of immediacy, grief, right? I'll die for him tomorrow. So she declares that she will die the next day out of grief and remorse, right? So final words. So those are there. Right. And then if you have no questions, if you have questions, please ask. Yeah. Okay. So now, because we have discussed, as in we have gone through two versions, and also we started around six, right? Yeah, so now almost 1.5 hours are over. So because of that, we will take a break of, I would say, around 10 minutes, right? If you want to have dinner, let me know. I can extend it to around 15 minutes. So does 10 minutes sound good as a break?
Yes, madam.
Okay, right. Then we will meet after 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, right. I guess Reverend Sahel is not here yet, so I would wait a moment. And meanwhile, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, even about the presentation.
Okay, madam.
Vimukti, did I give you the presentation topic?
Yes, madam.
I gave you, right? Can you
Yeah,
please?
Babar.
Yeah, on Barber Island, as in, did I give you it as a question?
No, just Babar Island, madam.
Yeah, I just told you that it would be Barber Island. Yeah, let me type it here.
Yeah.
So your lecture that day starts around 8:30, right? No, 9. Yeah.
9, madam.
Yeah, okay. So I gave Lasal time as 11:15. So that means, yeah, until. So who would like to go first? Any volunteers from both of you? Okay, so these would be the time slots. 10 minutes, no, 10 to 15. Yes, he's here. We'll make it 15 minutes. 12 minutes presentation and also 3 minutes Q&A. I would just ask you some questions. Yes, so that's it. All right, so we will first go through the third version and then we will move to the presentation topic. Right. And then here again you can see a contrast. Oh, in the merry month of May, a contrast from the one that we discussed earlier. So there you could see a reference to this Martin Mars, right? Yeah. Again, this idea of winter, darkness, death, but now again it is shifting to, I would say, maritime. And again, May. May again symbolizes what? Spring, happiness. And also when you say merry, happiness is doubled. So a very positive picture, but again, very ironical because this positive picture is contrasted with death. Later on, you are going to confront death literally. And then also, we discussed about this idea of youth, love, vitality, which can be a stark contrast with the later tragedy, I would say. And also seasonal imagery. So we will discuss about this seasonal imagery when we go through the literary devices, because seasonal imagery would be a hallmark of folk ballads. So the idea of grounding the narrative in nature. And then there's this idea when all things were blooming. That means nature is literally flourishing, blossoming. So flowers are there, life, vitality that is everywhere. And then here you can see a massive change, I would say, an immense change. Sweet William came from the western states. So back then it was young Jemmy, right, in the first one. And then second one you had Sir John. Now you have Sweet William, right? So sweet is very symbolic, right? Because William flowers, there's this idea of William flower. Those are associated with kind of gallantry and also love, right? And also geographic reference, Western states. Now we need to remember there is a reference to imperialism as well. Even in your presentation or your question, you can refer to all these, because here you can see a geographic reference and again to Europe as well. We need to remember during this time of imperialism, colonization, all these settlers were coming to America literally, right? So then these places were being colonized. So this geographic reference adds much weight to the narrative here, and also it kind of adds realism and situates the narrative, I would say, in a social context, in the contemporary social context. And also Sweet William can be very colloquial. So now the chivalry code is gone, right? So no longer the respect is attached to the name. And then here you have this idea and quoted Barbara Allan. So no longer it is a one-sided love, I would say, right? No longer one-sided, no longer unreciprocated, not just falling in love, but quoted. So quoted refers to this idea of formal traditional relationship. So again, that shows this social norm as well, a proper relationship, and it establishes this romantic theme as well there. So that means active persuasion of love, I would say. And then, but he took sick, very sick. That means William falls, I would say, gravely ill. And again, there's this idea of love sickness, right? So emphasizes severity, the repetition of this idea sick. Sick, very sick. Back then you could see this idea of very, but now sick is repeated, right? Yeah, so shift from romance to tragedy. So genre within a genre, I would say, within the entire, I would say, when you look at the entire picture within the genre of romance, you get this idea of tragedy there. So repetition of sick, it emphasizes severity and also this idea of foreboding death. So impending death, death is coming to him. And he sent for Barbara Allan. So now you cannot see this idea of a manservant here, right? And again, that is understandable because here we are not referring to this ideal European context, I would say, not referring to the night ship exactly, right? So now this idea of having this side of slavery might be missing when we refer to this context. So this is far more modern. Still, we are referring to another version of the same ballad. True, I agree. But still, you can see the different social context here. So always, all these literary pieces, they reflect the contemporary socio-political and cultural, even economic condition, I would say. Right? Yeah. And then he requests Barbara to see him, hoping for care. maybe reconciliation as well. So that shows his attachment on one hand and also his vulnerability. We discussed about this idea. He's unable to go himself. And also it kind of sets up this dramatic encounter, and also it heightens, I would say, the emotional conflict as well. And then again you can say all she said when she got there. Now what can you see with, as in when you refer to the language, so it is far more conversational, right? And also far more simple. All she said when she got there. So you can see how the simplification process has happened throughout the years. Throughout the versions, you can see the simplification. So Barbara responds again very coldly, very bluntly, I would say. Young man, you are a dying. So very blunt, I would say. And also, again, blunt and very cold. So his situation is not even considered, very unempathetic, right? So foreshadows the label hard-hearted. So this idea hard-hearted Barbara Allan. So in earlier versions you could say cruel Barbara Allan. Now it is turning into hard-hearted, and here you can see sort of a foreshadowing. Again, you may write it down as kind of a, I would say, a literary device, literally foreshadowing. And also you can see the tone is very much detached. So this contrast with the earlier blooming imagery, right? And here you can see a division made between, or I would say a line drawn between moral and emotional divide, right? And then here he says, oh yes, I'm sick and I'm very sick, and I think that death's upon me. So William confirms his illness, and also he acknowledges his impending death. So death is impending, and there is this acknowledgement. And also you can see it is kind of an embracing of death, right? And also this idea of repetition of sick, again a literary device, right? So that conveys desperation as well. And also death's upon me. So if you remember, there was a similar reference, similar utterance earlier as well. So death is personified here. So death is almost a character in this ballad. Death is not someone external, personified, and also given this close reference as an active participant here. Death has an active role to play. And also, but one sweet kiss from Barbara's lips. Now it is becoming kind of more intimate, you can see. So there were no such graphic details earlier. Will save me from my dying. So that means he pleads for a kiss, believing her love could heal him. So again, there's this idea of kind of a healing power attached to love, right? So that can again be read as one of the pivotal characteristics of all these romantic ballads, healing power of romance. And also this idea of romantic and tragic tension, those are intersected here. And also love as kind of a life-saving force that emphasizes the power and symbolism of love in all these ballads. But then here you can see again a very direct reference, and also you can see the utilization of colloquial language here. Don't you remember the other day you were down in town drinking? And now you can see again the simplification. So now no references to taverns, right? Yeah. So Barbara brings up William's earlier behavior, pointing out his, I would say, negligence, so, and also flirtations. Back then, you could not see an idea of flirtation. He was drinking just, as in, just toasting with his friends. We can identify it as fellow knights. But now it is not like that. I drank my health to the ladies all around, but my love to Barbara Allan. And again, you can see how the narration shifts. In the earlier versions, the narrative, I would say, did not shift because it was all spoken and all pictured by Barbara Allan, right? But now it is not like that. Now, the sweet William is talking. Barbara brought up William's earlier behavior and he is expanding on it, right? And so she accuses him of being unfaithful, right? And also this idea of flirting is there. So here slighted kind of implies this idea of insult, disregard. And he says, I remember the other day, right? I was downtown drinking. I drank my health to the ladies all round. So he accepts. So back then in the previous versions, you couldn't see this idea of acceptance, right? The conception of acceptance was not there. He did not accept. And also you can argue because he wanted to protect this chivalry code, this idea of honor, which is attached to, I would say, directly attached to knighthood. He had to protect it. He was bound to, I would say, protect it. But now it is not like that. Now we are referring to the American version, right? So the idea of honor is no longer very strong. So because of that, there's this notion of acceptance. He accepts. But then, with this admitting, he says, he admits the drinking but reaffirms his true love for her. Right? So, this idea of, I would say, tension between action and intention. So, that was the action, but intention was not flirtation, maybe. He acted carelessly, he accepts it, but his heart remained loyal. Again, there's this idea that how honor should be kept even if it is happening inside, I would say, this totally American sort of context and also much modern, but also honor is valued, right? A moral lesson is conveyed through the poem. So that's why we identified all these ballads to be didactic, right? So they convey this moral teaching. Moral judgment is there. And also, this highlights this tragic irony because Barbara's judgment would lead to missed reconciliation and also literally to this idea of impending death. And then again, we have he turned his face to the wall. So both refuse eye contact. So we have discussed about this idea of turning towards the wall, again suggesting death, and also this idea of on the verge of deathbed, and also on the other hand, symbolically, I would say, emotional and physical withdrawing, literally withdrawn from Barbara Allan. So emotional closure is suggested, isolation, and also self-imposed punishment, self-imposed isolation, and also it is almost stage-like, kind of a theatrical description of death. And also it caters to this ballad's narrative as well. Simplicity is there, but on the other hand, simultaneously with the simplicity, you can see this dramatic impact, right? Yeah. And then, yeah, there you can see the very last word she heard him say. So now there's a reference to his last word. William dies while labeling Barbara as hard hearted. So that is totally different, right? So, what could you say in the previous ballads? Was that an accusation or was he protecting Barbara when he was dying? The male protagonist. Was he protecting him or accusing? Yeah, you could see a sense of protection there. That was not an accusation. But now the tables have turned. So he dies claiming her to be hard hearted Barbara Allan. So in the second version, you could say cruel Barbara Allan. True, I agree. But then that was a self reference which was done by Barbara herself. But now it is not like that. It is William who does it, right? And also there you can see a repetition of hard hearted. That kind of underscores her pride and also her anger and its consequences. So you can read this as a consequence of pride as well. That's why I told you. So this can be identified as a didactic poem, right? So it gives you this moral lesson. And also his dying words condemn her emotionally. There is kind of a reinforcement of this tragic moral lesson. And then again, you can see this submission to nature. Now she's out there in nature as she passed on through London town. And again, this is very symbolic if we read it according to a post colonial perspective, I would say, because this was the time of imperialism, this was the time of colonization, right? But here you can see London town. The geographical location is given and it is very specific, right? Because London town can be a reference to this geographical location in America, inside USA. And that is very symbolic. Why? Because here we are referring to the time which is just after imperialism, just after colonization, right? So the America, as in this USA geographical location, has been colonized. Now, just like Jamestown, they have London town there. So that means Europe is being recreated inside America, right? So now American identity is gone now. So now European identity is being recreated here. This idea of knighthood, this idea of honor, this English sort of setting, that is being re-established here. Yeah. And then also this idea of bells again, that is brought to the picture. Barbara walks through the town and then she hears the bells ringing. So bells serve as this again idea of communal marker of death. This echoing sense can be seen of version 1 and version 2. Both this idea of death would be literal and symbolic, right? Yeah. The world announces the consequences of her actions. That idea is also there. On one hand, that is just an auditory symbol, but also on the other hand, you can see the community is accusing her. And every bell, it seemed to say, hard-hearted Barbara Allan. That means the bells metaphorically condemn her. So the bells tend to reinforce her guilt. And also you can see the personification of bells as well. You may write it down there. Not only death is personified, but also bells are personified here. And also not just personification, I would say symbolic personification as well. And they also, as in by they I'm referring to the bells also symbolically accuse Barbara, hard-hearted Barbara Allan. A repetition can be seen here. Then if we move to this part, yes. Yeah. She then passed on to the country road, right? Again, this idea of nature, right? And heard some birds singing. So this auditory imagery was not there back then in the first version and also in the second version. So the bird song, singing birds, so that symbolizes again nature's music. So now she's back in nature after leaving the town. So this dichotomy between the city and also the nature, city and rural landscape, those are also drawn. That means it is like her heart is being softened when she steps into the rural landscape, right? So in a way, you can identify it as a criticism of industrialization as well, a criticism of urbanization as well on one hand. Yeah. So when she passed on to the country road, when she hears all these birds singing, so when walking along the rural path, when she's hearing birds singing, so then nature's music kind of is contrasted with the death that she just witnessed. And also the singing birds can symbolize life's innocence, I would say. So innocence is what is missing in Barbara Allan. So Barbara Allan has cruelty, but the birds or the nature possesses innocence. So that highlights her guilt as well. So there you can see a juxtaposition. So the joyful nature that is contrasted with her inner torment. Again, a hallmark of tragic folk imagery, I would say, right? All these tragic folklore. And then every bird, it seems to say, this joyous bird singing, I would say, that is contrasted, right? There you can see every bird, it seemed to say, hard-hearted Barbara Allan. Again, personification of nature, right? So nature itself accuses her. So her guilt is externalized. Her internal guilt is externalized there, right? It is externalized into sound. And also the repetition of hard-hearted, that functions like a haunting refrain. So she's haunted by this idea. And also there is this idea of moral judgment which is sent by the universe. It is not just by the society. So back then you could see this idea of social judgment. With this idea of toiling of the bell, social judgment was there, but now you can say universal judgment. So judgment, moral judgment is sent by nature itself. And then she hadn't got more than a mile from town. So in the previous version you could see mile or two when she saw his calves coming. So there you can see again a change, right? So she hasn't gone far before she meets the funeral procession, right? So she witnesses this idea of funeral procession. So then there's this idea of physical distance as well, a mile. It shows her emotional journey as well. That means she cannot escape what she has caused. She is the cause of his death. And also this encounter, that physical encounter was not there before, right? In the previous version, I would say, even both the versions, first version and the second version. So now you can see this physical confrontation of death. So this encounter symbolizes this idea of fate, how fate is closing in. This idea of living meeting the dead, the dichotomy made between the living and the dead, the stark contrast, and also the use of corpse, and again that can be very stark imagery, dark imagery, right? And also it emphasizes mortality in a way as well. And then she says, "Oh, bring him here and ease him down. Let me look upon him." Only now, I would say, literally, her eyes are open, right? She asks for the body to be brought closer so that she can see him one last time. So, this would be the first sign of tenderness that you can see in this version, right? So ease him down, that gives this idea of kind of softening of the tone. So this contrast or this transformation, this gradual formation of grief, I would say, transformation from pride to grief, anger to remorse, you can see there. So this visual encounter, the physical encounter, that on one hand represents her emotional awakening and also her confrontation with loss. And then again repetition, you can see, or take him away, or take him away. Now she cannot bear it, almost unbearable, overcome with guilt and sorrow, right? So she cannot even bear to look any longer, for I'm sick and dying. And here you can see, so these would be repetitions of William's earlier words. So those would be echoes of his words. So now you can see how their fates are mirrored. So this concept of literally this idea of kind of being mirrored, how their fates are mirrored with each other, how those are literally pitted against each other, I would say. So this idea of a spiritual sickness is also there. So she has encountered this spiritual sickness and now it is transforming into physical decline. I would say kind of a symbolic punishment as well, right? Yeah. And then his death cold features say to me, hard hearted Barbara Allan, right? So there you can see again this idea of hard heartedness that is repeated. And that means she takes a look at this face as well. So that was missing in the previous versions, I would say. So even his lifeless face seems to accuse her. Death cold features. The dead body speaks through her conscience. Again, you can see personification. This may sound somewhat bizarre or stark, right? Yeah. Personification of the dead body. And also you can see how the repetition is identified as kind of a sealing of her fate, right? So this phrase becomes kind of a haunting echo. And also you can see how the guilt is internalized. So it was externalized before with the bird song, with nature's response, all this, but now it is internalized. She condemns herself. And then she says, "Oh, Father, Father, go dig my grave." So what is the difference that you can see here? "Father, Father, go dig my grave." To whom did she call in the earlier versions? Was it father or mother? Can you remember? Barbara Allen was calling mother or father in the previous versions.
Mother.
Yeah, exactly. Calling the mother, right? So now you can see the gender dichotomy. So now it is the father. So again, you can see that is childlike, and also there's this idea that psychological condition. So like the daughters are more attached to fathers, right? So again, those are very subjective claims, right? Even though those are identified as psychological claims, subjective. But again, you can see this gender dichotomy. Now the mother is not, I would say, requested, but the father is requested, right? To dig the grave. Go dig my grave. So this is far more direct, because back then it was just making the bed, making the deathbed literally. But again, that was far more, I would say, simple and not loaded like this, not complicated like this. Now it is very direct. And this idea of making the deathbed would be very indirect. But now you have a very direct, a very, I would say, grave reference literally. So she literally asked the father to prepare her grave. And also, it can be very childlike as well, father, father. And long and narrow. And again, there's this idea when you say narrow and long, again, a coffin, right? Coffin is symbolized. Simple, but again, very striking, dark imagery. And then again, you can see acceptance of death. So that kind of completes her emotional transformation from anger, from cruelty, from pride to remorse, literally. And then, sweet William died for me today. Now you can see the change of the tone. Back then it was just the young man, right? Yeah, but here you can see now it is sweet William. Sweet William died for me today. So she declares her intention to die the next day. I'll die for him tomorrow, mirroring William's death. So this idea of mirroring can be seen. So their actions are mirrored against each other. So perfect parallelism. And also, this parallelism creates poetic balance, I would say. Kind of a tragic symmetry is made between love and death. So, those are opposed to each other. So, this idea of shifting from moral punishment to romantic atonement. So, romantic atonement, so romantic reconciliation is possible through death, through moral punishment. So that kind of, you can see how the ballad fulfills the moral cycle from pride to loss, right? And then loss would lead to repentance, and then repentance would lead to unity in death. So in a way that it is deeply religious as well. And then they buried him both in the old graveyard. So now you can see this idea of burying scene. So that was not there. Burial was not there in the first two stanzas. So with the death, it was just over, right? So now those are buried side by side, all side and side each other. So back then maybe the phrase side by side was not there. So then side and side was used here. So there you can say physical closeness in death, right? So that contrasts the emotional distance in their real life. They were very much emotionally distanced, but now you can say now they are physically close in death. So that again suggests this idea of reconciliation beyond mortality. So beyond mortality, you can kind of, get together, that idea. Again, that is another, I would say, folk ballad convention as well. So this idea of love finding fulfillment in the grave. And then there you can see a red rose grew out of his grave, right? So there's this idea that plants grow from their graves, literally symbolizing this idea of continuation of love after death. This idea of afterlife is there, right? So can be something spiritual as well. And also red rose usually suggests what? As in white rose and red rose, do you have any idea? The boys, red rose and white rose, what is the distinction? Here you have a red rose. So usually, what is the symbol of, I would say, lively love, lively love and dead love? Tell me what is meant by white rose? Is it dead love or lively love? Consummated, passionate love. White love can be, as in white rose can be.
Dead love?
Yes, exactly. Dead love, right? Yeah. So that is the idea. So be careful if ever you give, white roses to someone. So there you can see the difference, right? But here it is very paradoxical what you can see here. A red rose grew out of his grace. So now both of them are dead. So symbolically, if they were following, as in the writers, here I'm using the word writers, the plural term. Why? Because the writers are anonymous, right? And if we specifically refer to the person who wrote this, right? Or person or people, I would say, because the writers are anonymous again. So then, if they followed the traditional literary device system, they would have used a white rose because these two are dead. Now, here what you can see is this idea of dead love. But here there's this idea, red rose, which symbolizes consummated passionate love and also loyalty. So there you can see, so here there's this idea of undying love, right? So even though the lovers are dead, the love has not died. That's why it is not a white rose, even though they are dead. It is still a red rose, right? Yeah. So there you can see. And also there's this idea of green briar, right? So briar again refers to thorns, right? So that again gives this idea of suffering can be suffering, sorrow, and also endurance, natural imagery, right? So from his grave comes this red rose, right? So this is grave here, yeah, a typo. Red rose. So from his grave what is coming out is this symbol of undying love. But from hers, that would be green briar. That means this idea of kind of, her cruelty, her hard-heartedness, her cruelty is symbolized by that idea. They grew and grew so very high. So the plants flourish beyond ordinary limits, right? So no longer this ordinary limit, right? That means this idea of transcendence. That means they allow surpasses earthly bounds, right? So it is kind of transcending the earthly bounds. This idea of repetition of grow. So this idea of unstoppable force of love. Even after death, love cannot be stopped. So again, you can see this idea of hyperbole, grew and grew so very high. That means surpassing the physical limit or the, I would say, the normal limit or the ordinary limit. There you can see hyperbole as well. And then you can see they lapped, they tied in a true love knot, right? So the rose and briar entwine, that means symbolizing eternal union. So they entwine when they grew higher, they are interconnected, a universal folk symbol of everlasting love. There you can see, right? So they are lovers denied in life, but it is finally consummated, finally reciprocated in nature's embrace. That is what you can see here. So this closing image is very powerful. It, I would say, the rose ran round the briar, how they kind of, entwine with each other. So the closing image transforms tragedy into timeless romance, right? So love is redeemed through death. That idea is there, right? Yeah. So there you can see this idea of ending. It kind of elevates Barbara Allan, I would say, from a very simple moral tale to a tragic love legend. So there's this idea of thematic arc as well. So how it literally transforms from pride to guilt and then punishment. So death would be the punishment for both of them, I would say, right? Because there's this idea of flirtation as well. So it's a punishment for William, and also because of Barbara's pride and cruelty, that would be again a punishment for Barbara as well. But then this idea of redemption is there, and the redemption would lead to eternal union. And again, you can see a far more romanticized state can be found in the third version, the last version, much more than the first version and the second version, if you look at it in, I would say, a comparative perspective, right? Yeah. Okay. And then if you need any clarification, any more clarification regarding the line by line analysis, you may ask. And then we will move to this analysis. Right. Okay. So already went through the introduction. And here you have the presentation topic. So this is your topic. You have to base your presentation on this. You have to compare and contrast the three versions of Barbara Allen. So here you can refer to the similarities, right? And also contrasting points, you can refer to language, literary devices, the commonality of the themes. I would roughly go through all these, but you don't have to restrict yourselves to the points that I have given. So read up on Barbara Allen, right? So there are several, I would say, stuff that you can refer to: JSTOR articles, Google Scholar articles, academia. I think I have shown you how to log into JSTOR when you were in your first year, when we were doing this academic reading and writing course. Yeah, I showed you how to log into JSTOR. If you need any clarification, any help regarding that, if time permits, after we go through all this, I will show you how to log into JSTOR and read journal articles if you want to find out details, right? Yeah. Yes. Okay. And just remember that your presentations would be, I would say, they would go through all these AI detectors as well. So don't use AI, right? And because you can find several details available in internet, I would say, right? I will show you how to find out details as in via JSTOR and all these other academic platforms. Even if not, you have several scholarly articles. So I think that would be better if I just show you right now. I'll just show you. So again, the date would be 6th of November. And these are the 3 time slots. So you can just choose whatever you want, the time slot. And then the presentation would be, yeah, 12 minutes. And for 3 minutes, there would be question and answering. So altogether 15 minutes, right? So there's no specific number of slides, right? So you may do it in a way convenient to you. So try to have a proper introduction, right? And then you can just refer to all these versions and then talk about the similarities and differences. Yeah. Okay, so now I will just show you how to log into JSTOR and find out these articles, and I will show you all these other, I would say, available stuff in the internet. Because don't use actual ChatGPT and all these things, because what happens is so always you won't refer to Wikipedia and all these. I'm not kind of accusing you of using ChatGPT. I know that all of you are not doing it, but in case, right, I'm referring to the idea. Because what usually happens is, because Wikipedia is something that does not, I would say, carry proper information. But the problem is all this ChatGPT, specifically ChatGPT, quotes Wikipedia as well. Then there you can see, right? So ChatGPT won't be very reliable. And also, anyway, the presentations would be AI detected before marking. Yeah, let me share the screen. Now, yes. Can you see my screen? The Google window, you can, right? Yeah. Let
Yes, madam.
Yeah, okay. So let me show you JSTOR. So you can just click this one, JSTOR, and then you can log into JSTOR with your Google account. Oh. Yeah, let me use another. Okay, yeah, here. So just click login here and then continue with Google, this option. Then here. Oh. Likewise, you can use your Google account and log in to JSTOR. Yes. Yes. Now, after that, you are logged in. And here, this is like a treasure because this provides you access to more than 100 articles, as in free articles. You can read free articles, as in 100 articles for free. So let me just type Barbara Allen here. So when you type Barbara Allen, just search for Barbara Allen, you would get, yeah, you would get several findings. So we will just wait and see. If you have a university email address, you can, yeah, log in through your university as an institution as well. So yeah, you have over 50,000 results, right? So you don't have to refer to all this AI stuff, right? So here you can see. So you may read some. So folk song and ballad, controlling women, right? Yeah. So here you can see different articles. So some are open access, and here, right? I'm not going to go through everything. So you can just see. And here, when you click this read online option, so then the article appears here, right? Then you can again click this option, free 100 articles. Right, yeah, so there you can see. So some are available, some are not. So most of them would be available, so you can read. And also it is not like that you have to go through the entire article, right? You can just read the abstract. So that would be fine. So it can be a bit slow. Sometimes you can get the PDF as well. So it is a bit slow, but usually the article appears here. The article appears here. You can go through the abstract and collect some main points, I would say. Yes. So I'm not going to wait. So likewise, you can find articles via JSTOR. And also another proper way for you to find out would be when you just type Barbara Allen, right? So just type edu at the end. And then here you would get, yeah, there are some people called Barbara Allen as well. So just type Barbara Allen, the ballad, right? Ballad and edu websites. So here this idea of edu is when you can see edu towards the end of a link, as in web link, right? So here you can see, right, edu. That means that is a proper website, right? A proper website attached to, I would say, a university, academic institute, or whatever, right? So these are proper ones. Ballad of Barbara Allen, right? Here you can see. Yes. And also some PDF documents are available. So it doesn't necessarily have to have edu, but what I'm saying is that here also you can see edu, right? So those should be more reliable, and never ever go for Wikipedia, because Wikipedia can be edited by anyone with, yeah, even these, right? So here you can see several journal articles, and also you can just type journal articles or even research articles, right? Then you get several details. You can just get the PDF. Here you can see, right? Many information you can find, right? Okay, that's it. Yeah, okay. If you need any clarification regarding anything, ask me. And yes, we were here. Yeah, okay. So if you have any concerns about the presentation, you may ask. Yes, okay. Then we went through the introduction. Yeah, and I will just briefly rush through these because we have already discussed about these, I would say, and also you have to go through these and kind of do the comparative analysis, but I will just run through, right? Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, you may ask. Yeah. So here you can see, so seems there are no questions, so I will just move to the comparative analysis. So this is identified as the English Scarlet Town version. So child, we discussed about this person, child, not a child, but his surname was child, this collector. Yeah, folklore, folk songs, folk poetry collector. And here you can see geographical anchoring is there, as you can see here. So, and then the geographical anchoring, there you can see London. So London is identified as the setting, physical setting. So that means London situates the narrative in kind of a real urban environment. So it is not an abstract, or I would say a rural countryside setting, right? Not like the Scottish versions. And also it kind of caters to this idea of a denser social world, I would say, right? Yeah, that is also there. This urban setting kind of heightens the sense of societal scrutiny, I would say. Barbara's pride and also William's death both are witnessed by the city, the bells, the community, and the public funeral, public accusation, those are there, right? And also you can see no seasonal or temporal specificity because no mention of May, right? No mention of this Halloween, right? Martin Mars, nothing is mentioned there. That means seasonal markers are literally absent. So that absence of seasonal markers kind of remove, I would say, the romanticized imagery. The romanticizing aspect is gone there. And also it is kind of more morally and tragically focused, not grounded in a romantic frame, I would say, right? Yeah, and also temporal vagueness can be seen. That means no specificity. Temporal means referring to time, right? So we do not know about the time. So because of that, this idea of pride, love, and death, those are not tied to a specific time of the year. So that gives kind of a universal touch, I would say, right? Yeah. And also you can see, we discussed about geographical anchoring, about London, and also no urban and rural imagery, I would say, right? So they are, and again, as in no temporal imagery, but urban imagery and rural imagery are given, right? So references to town bells, public spaces, specificity to London. So there's this idea of kind of concrete elements as well, city bells, as in the movement within town, she passes through the town. And also this idea of rural imagery, how rural imagery takes her back to her senses, I would say. This dichotomy is made between them. And also we discussed about this, unlike versions 2 and 3, right? So no idea of seasonal motif, right? Romanticized natural world is not to be seen. And also bells and auditory markers, this idea of dead bell tolling, so that kind of appears in a very prominent manner. So this idea of like a public auditory signal, so those are important. So those can be seen in version 1, right? If you have questions, interrupt me and ask. And version 2, right? So there you can see the difference again, right? Yeah, because there is this Scottish origin, because the version originates from Scotland and it is associated with this Scottish origin. And also you can see this idea of Martin Mass, so that reference situates the narrative around November 11th. And even now you can see how November 11th has kind of this significance, right? I don't want to go into details because it is not very related, but I'm pretty sure that you know about November 11th if you are familiar with social media and all this. Yeah. So it is like this a traditional Scottish feast back then, not the significance that it has now. So this idea of marking of late autumn. So seasonal references are there. It is seasonally symbolic because it evokes decay, death, and also I would say the end of life cycles, and also this idea of historical resonance, cultural resonance is there, right? So temporal anchoring is there. And then also there's this idea, this is Scottish poet Allan Ramsay, right? So he quoted this as in his publication preserves this text. So you cannot say that he was the writer exactly, but there's this idea that his publication is preserving this text, right? Yeah, so because this version can be one of the oldest surviving forms of the ballad, right? And also Ramsay's version kind of helped to standardize the ballad. That is also important, specifically with the Scottish dialect and local idioms. And also this idea of folk authenticity can be seen there, right? So as a folk version. And also you can see this idea of I would say moral and emotional emphasis can be didactic, right? So it emphasizes Barbara's pride, her remorse, and also ultimate repentance from her end, I would say, right? So that is also important. So that is about the version 2. And if we move to version 3, yeah. So there you can see this American folk tradition version if we refer to the historical, I would say, context. So the ballad appeared in United States around 1836, right? So decades after its circulation in Britain. Again, you can see this transatlantic transmission of folk culture, right? American oral tradition can be seen. So American social and geographical realities and how they were adapting to the European setting. So this reflects migration, the ballad becoming a part of the American oral tradition because this has its roots in Europe, how it was transferred literally, I would say. And again, yeah, here you can see that the ballad, if no other, traveled west with every wagon. Every wagon here, again, this idea of imperialism as well. So that means how when the American population is spread westward, what happened when they were populating different parts of America. So this ballad went with every wagon. That means this was so popular, right? So this literally went from mouth to mouth. So there's this idea of oral tradition as well. So geographical anchoring was there, this idea of westward expansion, right? Yeah. And also language pronunciation and dialect, that is important because here you can see in American versions all these regional pronunciation patterns, right? And much more simplified versions and also adapted phrasings can be seen, right? Yeah. Give me a minute. My husband is getting a call. I need to give him the phone. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so there you can see this geographical anchoring, and the most important, I would say, the most pivotal thing that you can see here is it is totally connected or interconnected to this idea of imperialism. Literally, imperialism is reflected in this geographical anchoring. And also through the language as well. So regional pronunciation can be seen, simplification, and also all these adapted phrasings. Those are adaptations from the previous versions, I would say, from the previous ballads. But you can see a very specific regional pronunciation. So for instance, you can see gain, right, and also twa for two. Likewise, American speech patterns can be seen. And also there's this idea, I would say, this idea of accessibility, making them accessible to local audiences, because these people were not like very educated, right? So no access for formal education. So because of that, these should be literally made accessible. So that was done via these regional variations, like phonetic adaptation, and also how these new linguistic environments were coming in. All these are reflected from the third version, I would say, right? And you can see the cultural adaptation here, regional dialects, and even the names of the protagonist, Sweet William, turning from the chivalry court to this rural setting, right? Much more general, you can see. So it is no longer surge on, I would say. Literally, the night ship is not there. So they have bid adieu to the night ship. Now it is a story of a general context, right? Yeah. And also this idea of memorability is there. It enhances memorability when there is this narrative function. So you can see the narrative function is kept throughout all the versions, I would say, right? Yeah. So that about the third version, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's about the third one. And then if we go through the compatibilities that you can see here, so the plot is same. So you can see, so the same plot is reflected in all the versions. So across all traditions. So the first one, in version one, you can see London. Second one would be a Scottish one. Third one would be this American version. But again, this core narrative, it remains consistent, right? In the first one, it would be just the young man, right? And then you can see what happens, the Barbara Allan's perspective, I would say, that perspective comes in, and also this idea of being buried together, even though that is only apparent in the final version, right? The plot is same. So that means the resilience of narrative can be seen even across cultures. The narrative has been taken. And also this idea of deathbed scene, deathbed encounter, death chamber, that is central to all the versions, right? So this idea of cold refusal is there, initial detachment is there, and also emotional climax is highlighted, right? So you can see a very strong moral reflection. And again, if we refer to the themes, I would just rush through the themes as well, even though we went through all these with reference to the three versions. And also some recurring phrases in all the versions. When you are doing your presentation on this comparison, when you are referring to the compatibilities and contrasting points, you can refer to these recurring phrases, right? So this phrase arms hick, so that is repeated throughout, not just twice, thrice sometimes, right? Yeah. And also Barbara's initial blunt acknowledgement of William's condition, I would say, I think you are dying. So that would be a very direct reference that is there. And also hard-hearted Barbara Allen or cruel Barbara Allen, those are repeated. And also this idea of dying for him, this ultimate repentance, I would say, this idea of creating tragic symmetry, tragic balance. So those are repeated. And also this aspect of externalization of moral judgment and also externalization of death. So internalizing and externalizing death as a dichotomy, how they are, I would say, literally put against each other. That is also there, right? So you may refer to those. And if we move to the common themes or the compatible themes that you can see here, the first one would be unrequited or unreciprocated love, right? So this love is constant, devoted, passionate, but still it is unreciprocated, right? So Barbara initially withholds her affection. It can be either out of pride or anger or even moral judgment, or can be moral propriety as well. Because we need to remember this was a time of chivalry code, the knightship, the idea of, as in I would say, the idea of honor was there, respect, chivalry code. So those should be protected. Those things were there. And also this idea of kind of love remaining unfulfilled until death and consummation after death, right? And also you can see this emotional cost of delay and also misunderstanding, pride, right? Those things are repeated throughout. And also as another one, you can see tragically flawed human conduct, how both protagonists are, I would say, deeply flawed. Barbara's pride and hardness of heart, and also William's earlier flirtations or indulgence in alcoholism, I would say, those are criticized here as human imperfection, and also how those would cater to this idea of death, right? Fragility of life, how all these emotional failings can intervene with each other. And then you have remorse, right? Barbara's eventual realization of William's death, or else I would say impending death. There you can find profound guilt. So her grief and repentance, those are evident. So those are culminated in her own death, right? And also this moral dimension, as we discussed earlier, this didactic perspective, right? So all these can be seen. And then another theme would be consequences of pride and cruelty. So initial coldness, that is, I would say, reflected in a stark contrast with the final moment. So final moral judgment. This emotional pride is criticized, and also the vanity of the aristocracy, I would say, that can also be seen. So worrying about trivial matters, that can be seen throughout, right? Yeah. And then, yes, if we move to these contrasting points, meanwhile, if you have any questions, just interrupt me. I'm just doing kind of a concluding remark of what we have discussed. So as contrasting points, you can see this idea of a spatial and temporal setting, right? So in the first one, you get the scarlet town. We discussed about it, how scarlet reflects redness, the bright redness, and how it in turn caters to violence, right? Yes. And also this idea of merry month of May. So it is not the Martin Mars. In version 2, you can see Martin Mars time, which is dark, which symbolizes decay, which symbolizes death, which resonates with all these darker versions of life. But here, merry month, it symbolizes literally the happiness, and how those are pitted against each other, how those are juxtaposed. And also here you can say this idea of oxymoron as well, how two paradoxical elements are juxtaposed with each other. And then also you can see, if you consider the spatial setting, first one and the second one, those are settled in Europe, the setting would be Europe. But here in the third version, you can see a more Americanized version of the ballad, right? How the setting has changed with imperialism, I would say. Yeah. And then the names of the characters. First one, young Jemmy Grove, right? That is also very symbolic because it is kind of a simple term. But then in the second version, you can see this idea of chivalry code. It has turned into Sir John. And in the third version, Sweet William. And also, you need to remember that this is a name usually used in American folk ballads, American folk versions. So William is kind of a common name, right? So a far more generalized version you can see here. And that's why you can see a heightened sense of romanticizing there as well. When you look at it in a comparative perspective, I would say, right? Yeah. And then if you look at the language, so in version 1, you can see more archaic language. So consistent with its Scottish or English origins, regional English origins. And again, we need to remember that we cannot draw lines between the beginning or the initiating point or the ending of Old English period or Middle English period, right? So there are timelines, that is true. So some people argue that would be 1050, some people said no, that will be 1150, likewise. But what we need to remember is that would be a gradual change, a gradual process. So that was not an overnight change. It was not like that Old English time period ended at this specific point and then the Middle English time initiated. It was not like that. Always a gradual change. And that gradual change is reflected in all these literary texts, right? So that is something really important that you can see here. And the spellings and dialects you can see. So holy, holy, rose, she, up. So holy is not a synonym for holy. So that would be a synonym for slowly, right? Likewise, you can refer to all these differences. And then in the third one, you can see a more straightforward, a more modernized sort of a language, I would say. And that reflects this American adaptation, not only the linguistic adaptation. We need to refer to linguistic imperialism as well, because here what you can see is a literal, I would say, imposing of a different culture, right? Of the culture of the colonized. The power dynamics are very clear here. And then if we refer to the ending is also very symbolic, because version 1 and 2, they end with Barbara Allen's realization of her fault with her request for a soft and narrow bed. So soft and narrow, there you can see this idea of grave, the idea of coffin is there. But then when you contrast it with the third version, so that is far more, I would say, a romanticized version. The burial, right? Symbolic growth of a red rose and green briar. Again, this idea of reuniting, right? After death. So, this idea of afterlife and also undying love, right? Reciprocated undying love, I would say. Because in life, you could say their love is unreciprocated. But after death, that is reciprocated. Again, you can see this idea of oxymoron as well. And also, there are several literary devices we discussed about several literary devices throughout when we were going through these three versions. And symbolism and imagery can be found, specifically visual imagery with reference to the roses, and also auditory imagery with reference to the bell, right? And also this seasonal setting, autumnal setting, and that establishes the theme of death and decay and also end of cycles. So those imagery, those are again very important to pervade the entire narrative as well. And also Scarlet Town, we discussed about it, so how Scarlet can suggest passion, blood, and also sin, intensity, how the words are romantically charged, and also how they would reflect the contemporary socio-political context, the military context, which was there back then. And also Rose and Briar ending in version 3, knotted after death, literally, right? This idea of fidelity, loyalty, those are conveyed. And then linguistic features, you can refer to the Scots, I would say Scottish dialect, and also this idea of cultural authenticity, right? Cultural specificity, I would say, how those are translated throughout cultures, how this interconnection can be seen, and also the repetition, like slowly, slowly, holy, right? All these, how they would cater to Barbara's reluctance, and also this agonizing pace of the tragedy. So these characteristics of tragedy as well, right? So when you engage in this comparative analysis for your presentation, you may refer to all these significant points, and you don't have to restrict yourselves to the points that we discussed in the lecture, right? You can refer to different articles, I would say these JSTOR articles. You can refer to Google Scholar, right? You can refer different points. You can come up with your own arguments. You can be creative. You are totally, I would say, allowed to come up with creative stuff as long as your arguments are sensible. That is totally okay, right? And make sure to add references as well if you refer to external research articles. So for references, I would give you Harvard referencing style because that would be easier for you. So because we have around 5 minutes, let me show you Harvard referencing style. I hope you can see the screen. Let me share it. Meanwhile, if you have any question, feel free to ask. Yes. So here I will show you how to add citations. This would be helpful for you for the other subjects as well, maybe. Yeah. So here you can refer to my bib or else citation machine. So usually this is what I use. Cite this for me. This is easier. So if you refer to any article, you can just click this create citations option. Just click whatever you have used, right? Either it is a website, a book, or a journal. So I'll just click journal. Just ignore the ads. And then you can just copy and paste the journal. So I will just take one and copy here. Meanwhile, if you have questions about the lesson, ask me, or else about the presentation. And also, I'll try to meet you online tomorrow night as well, because otherwise we won't be able to finish everything. We will try to finish Franklin's Tale tomorrow, and also start maybe Charge of the Light Brigade, or at least I would say Dr. Faustus. We'll try. So I'll just take this one. When you can just click this link and then search, and then all the details appear here, right? Yeah. So if the article is accessible, it would appear here. If not, you can create manual citation as well. You don't have to create manual citation. If you have all the details there, so all these would be automatically filled, right? So when that's automatically filled, you can just finalize it here, complete citation. When you complete the citation, you would get the cited one here, right? So when you properly cite it, yeah, it would appear here. You can select the referencing style here as well. Yeah. So any other question before we wind up? Any other last minute question?
No, madam.
Okay, right. Then we will call it a day, and we will meet tomorrow. Maybe not from 6. Is 7 to 10 convenient for you? Is that a convenient time slot? 7 to 9 for all of you, Reverend and boys?
Okay, madam.
Okay, right. Then we will meet at 7 tomorrow. Okay, then we'll call it a day. Good night, everyone.
Good night, madam. Good night, madam.